How much money can you save by buying right now instead of waiting until you can buy in the future? I know you're probably getting tired of hearing us real estate agents out there saying you should buy right now. But there's a reason I can prove to you that buying a home right now is a very sound investment decision with your money. And today I'll use some simple numbers to show you how it works. Most folks right now are scared of the interest rates and how that affects your monthly costs. Honestly, you could be looking at $300 to $500 more a month right now than if you just waited for interest rates to come down in the future. So how in the world can buying now be a better decision? I want to show this exact scenario and how it plays out over the course of 2 years so you understand exactly how much you're overspending. Let's say you bought a $400,000 home right now for 5% down. That's a $20,000 down payment. You could do more, you could do less, but for the sake of these numbers, it really doesn't make that big of a difference. Let's also say you took the typical interest rate right now, which is around 7%. That's $2,216 of interest per month. And that's $52,920 of interest over the course of just 2 years. So let's say you wait it out and buy 2 years from now. That same home that you would have purchased for $400,000 2 years ago has now gone up in price. So we're looking at around a $441,000 home. You put 5% down and now that's around $22,000 for a down payment. But your interest rate now is down to, let's say, 5.5%. So now you're paying $1,920 per month in interest. That's about $45,800 of interest over the course of the next 2 years. So you saved yourself about $7,150 of interest over the course of 2 years when you waited for the interest rate to come down by 1.5%. But remember, you also paid $41,000 more for the same home 2 years later. So if you hadn't waited for 2 years, you would have $41,000 of equity to offset your losses that you've paid with an increased interest rate. If you wait for 2 years, you'd have a lower payment by about $300 a month, but you'd be paying way more for the home and having less to show for your investment. Guys, there's nothing rocket science about this. When rates come down, what happens to home prices? We saw this just over the last few years when prices skyrocketed. Rates are at their peak now, which the Fed has repeatedly said. So what do you think happens to your equity if you get in the game now instead of later? I used a 5% clip for appreciation per year, which is pretty normal in our area. But honestly, it only takes about 1.5% appreciation per year to make this a lucrative investment. And that's even with a 7% interest rate. So let's flesh out those numbers. Let's say you wait for 2 years and you buy a home that's been appreciating at a 1.5% appreciation rate per year. So now you're buying a $412,000 home at 5% down with a 5.5% interest rate. That's $1,794 of interest per month and about $42,800 in interest over the course of 2 years. So you saved about $10,150 in interest if you wait versus if you bought now. However, if you bought now with that 7% interest rate, you'd be sitting on about $12,000 of equity. That means you'd be about $2,000 in the green over the scenario of waiting for 2 years for the interest rates to come down. I'm focusing on interest rates right now because that's the big boogeyman that everybody's using to scare themselves out of purchasing right now. But the truth is, when you own a home, you're also paying a portion of every single payment you make towards buying down the principal. As you progress through the payments over the life of the loan, you're paying less in interest every month and more in principal. So it's worth noting that you're actually forcing yourself to save money every time you make a mortgage payment. Let's say you bought this year instead of waiting for 2 years, and now let's factor in the principal that you've paid. You would pay around $10,600 in principal over the course of just 2 years. You paid $20,000 in a down payment, which is your equity. Then you refinance your mortgage 2 years later when everyone else has been waiting on those rates to drop, and now you have a 5.5% interest rate. You now have about $30,500 in principal that you've already paid down. A potential of $41,000 of equity if the home is appreciating at a 5% rate, and that gives you a grand total of about $70,000 worth of equity in your home. Oh, and by the way, your interest payment is now less than $1,700 a month. That's $200 cheaper than if you had waited to buy when rates came down 2 years later. But you might say, it's so much cheaper to rent right now and just save up money. All right, Mr. and Mrs. Frugal, if you're capable of saving up around $70,000 in the next 2 years, then have at it. That's probably not possible for most of us, but for case of argument, let's say you could save $70,000 in 2 years. If you dumped all of that $70,000 into a home after waiting for 2 years, you'd still only be saving yourself about $300 a month compared to what you'd be paying right now. And then your alternate reality self that bought 2 years ago instead of waiting would just be refinancing when the rates come down and be saving even more money than you. So to answer the question, how much money could you save if you bought now instead of waiting to buy in the future? It sounds like for a $400,000 house that you buy today, you'd be saving around $50,000, and that's not including any down payment that you bring to the table. Here's the takeaway. Buying a home is a bit like having a forced investment account. You are automatically paying down principal, which increases your equity, and you're benefiting from the increase of the values of homes around you, which only raises your initial investment. So waiting in a market that is bound to appreciate is actually a really bad investment strategy. This could lose you valuable money and give you a higher barrier to entry in the future. I hope these numbers help to show you that there are some scenarios where it makes a lot more sense to get into the market right now. I know that might mean sacrificing your very cheap rental rate, but the sooner you can get into owning in an appreciating market, the more value you can build for yourselves in the future, even if that means taking a higher interest payment right now. I hope these numbers are super helpful in helping you understand how to make a sound investment strategy in real estate right now. That's it for this episode, guys. If you have any additional questions, my information's in the description below. Feel free to reach out. I would love to discuss your particular situation more. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video.